Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Daniel, what were your thoughts on the movie?
I loved it. I thought it was awesome. It's the first MCU movie, and let me give all the qualifiers. First MCU movie in a long time that was actually good. But I've always had a soft spot for Guardians of the Galaxy. I loved the first movie. The second was like okay, but I've always loved all the characters. And yeah, I thought it was an awesome movie. I thought it was very heartfelt and like really tugged at me, tugged at my heartstrings.
Thank you for clarifying.
And I mean, so many scenes still stick with me. And I've also always had a soft spot for Rocket in particular. So I think the movie was like really well suited for me to like it a lot. But I just keep replaying just the very first scene of that movie in my head of Rocket walking around like sad, listening to Creep.
What I loved about that scene is that he wasn't singing every lyric. He would just chime in here and there, which felt very real.
Yeah.
When you're listening to music, you just kind of start mumbling a little bit. You can't help it. It just creeps out, if you will. I remember my initial reaction to the first Guardians of the Galaxy. One thing I really liked about it is that it felt different from the other Marvel movies. It was like this could have just been a movie, not a MCU movie. I will say on rewatch, sometimes I don't feel that quite as much. Once you start getting into the big CGI battles, it starts to feel like there's a movie that I like, and then there are the parts of it that feel like, oh, it's more MCU. Which is just, once you've seen it so many times, it starts to feel a little bit old. But Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 definitely gave me some of that feeling again. I loved how much it leaned into the darkness, how much it took itself seriously. One of my biggest pet peeves with these movies is when it starts to get serious and then you undercut it with a joke. Most recent example, Shang-Chi, when he's describing all the training he went through. And I was like, all right, I'm finally getting into this. I'm seeing like the underdog is getting stronger. And then Aquafina interrupts and you cut from the flashback to some goofy joke where the flight attendant is like, so do you want the meat or the vegetarian? And she's like, well, I'll have the meat. And she's like, well, we're all out of meat. And she's like, okay, well, I'll have the vegetarian. Then she's like, how about you? Do you want the meat or the vegetarian? And she's like, well, I'll have the vegetarian because there is no meat. Daniel, calm down. You can't laugh so hard into the mic. You'll blow our eardrums out. So this movie, I think for the most part, didn't do that. When it was being serious, it stuck with it. I felt feelings. I haven't done that in a long time. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think I did see a lot of criticism saying that the darker, more emotional scenes got undercut with humor. And I actually didn't feel that way during the movie. And maybe I would feel differently on a rewatch as well. But I felt like they allowed the really serious moments to linger somewhat. And then they added in the humor and stuff that made it feel more like, like a fun roller coaster, which these types of movies feel like.
There was one moment, and I guess let's announce now, spoilers. Let's free ourselves to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Spoiler alert! There is one moment I remember that it was a pretty serious moment, and it definitely gets cut off by a joke. And that's when they're wearing their goofy, different colored spacesuits, and Peter is talking to alternate reality Gamora, and basically pleading with her, like, I think if you open up your heart, if we give this a chance. And then they get interrupted where they're like, this is an open line. Everybody could hear their conversation. It didn't bother me, though, because we stuck with the moment long enough. It's literally a question of, do we get to experience the drama long enough to its conclusion before it gets cut off by a joke? And I felt like we sat in that moment for the right amount of time, so it didn't bug me.
That actually brings up one question I've been debating, which is, does Peter Quill's character arc get too stilted in this movie, right? Because we have so much focus on Rocket, and it's kind of interesting because, well, I guess that's sort of the whole point of Guardians of the Galaxy. All the characters, they're all kind of struggling with the same thing, which is like, how do they find their place in the galaxy, right? And that's why they all suit each other, right? Because they can be like a family. But Peter Quill at the beginning of the movie, right, is like drunk and depressed in a similar way to Rocket because he lost Gamora. And I mean, I think he goes through somewhat of a transformation through the movie, right, of a kind of trying to get Gamora back, and it doesn't work. But he feels again the sense of family with the Guardians. And then I guess right at the end of the movie he decides to go back to like his grandpa. But I guess my question for you is like, all the elements of a good arc are there for him, but did he feel too sidelined for you to emotionally connect with it?
Yeah, I remember what I felt during the movie is I'll say that the conclusions for all the characters landed. So it got to a point where emotionally it worked for me. But I do remember thinking this movie was guilty of something a lot of season or series finales are guilty of, which is you get to the end and you realize, wait a minute, we didn't plant any seeds that we can now bring to a conclusion. So we have to quickly plant some seeds at the beginning of this movie so it can feel like there's a conclusion. And in this case, it was, Peter, you abandoned your grandfather. You haven't seen him in 30 years. And I was like, that's true, but it's never been brought up until now. So it felt like we quickly introduced there's this need Peter has had all along. And at the end of the movie, he's going to go and fulfill it. I will say, like I said, in the moment, it worked for me. Maybe it's just they used the right music. The actor, Chris Pratt, he sold it and it just landed. But in retrospect, and even during the movie, I was like, I mean, it's true. He hasn't seen his grandpa, but like, how come nobody brought it up until right now?
But at least it's a good point, but at least thematically it fits very well. Like it makes sense. His character is this like lost boy traveling through the galaxy.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. Thematically, it does fit. It's just the logistics of how you bring that theme to its conclusion felt a little messy, I guess.
I'll even a little more support for it too is, well, maybe it never came up because that's the type of thing that character has been running away from, right? And ignoring. But I guess you're right. Then you would expect the characters around him to like have brought it up previously. Yeah.
And the thing is, they really wouldn't have brought it up though, because who's close enough with Peter to bring it up? Mantis would bring it up, but she's only recently gotten closer with them. And by the way, they're brother and sister, which is also a funny thing. Yeah, see, that
I totally forget about that.
It barely played into things, which was kind of weird.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, it wasn't revealed until the holiday special, where that's kind of the conclusion of the holiday special. She's like, I'm your sister. And he's like, that's the greatest gift of all. Now I have family. And then they mention it a couple of times in this movie, but it sort of fades away. Like, it would have been nice if before Peter went to Earth, he was like, let's keep in touch, sister. Let's support each other or something. MJ chimes in. He says, I felt that was somewhat set up in the earlier movies. It's talking about Peter and his grandfather running away from Earth. So, hey, I'm going to rewatch the movie tomorrow. So I'll see if that changes my feelings at all. You never know which way that's going to go, because Spider-Man No Way Home, loved it on first viewing. One of the best theatrical experiences I've had in a long time. When I rewatched it later on, I was like, oh, there's some dumb stuff in this. A lot of just really goofy humor that doesn't land. So we'll see which way this movie goes. I released a video just yesterday asking the question, was this movie emotionally manipulative? Because that's a phrase I saw a lot of people throwing around. And I think the general complaint is sort of twofold. It's one, that it's using the oldest trick in the book of showing cute animals in harm's way. So it's just an easy way to get people to feel bad. It's kind of cheating. And two, there were a lot of near-death fake-outs. Did that jive with you at all? Did you feel that way?
I did not feel emotionally manipulated at all.
Wait, and just so we can earn the title of this video. Yeah, I saw the movie, and I was like, that's a great movie. And then I went online and saw maybe it wasn't that good. Maybe I was emotionally manipulated. And I started to wonder, did James Gunn gaslight me? Was I gaslighted by Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? Think about it.
And the answer is?
I don't think so.
Yeah, neither do I.
Yeah, there was I don't want to repeat everything I said in that video, but I was curious to get your thoughts. The one moment that did bug me in terms of sort of manipulating us was the Drax scene where they're on the weird biology planet. Drax gets shot a couple of times. We go into slow motion, and it feels like they're setting up. He might die right now. And then it kind of felt like, move on. He's actually totally fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, that was the only one. And for me, it just kind of passed by quickly anyway. The rest of the movie, I felt like the stakes remained. And I didn't feel like I was being emotionally manipulated. I felt like I was being told a compelling story. Mm-hmm. Like, I thought the story of Rocket and his other animal friends is just like a super compelling story with a good payoff at the end. And that's like what movies are.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I saw one comment kind of in response to my video that asked, what was the point of all those near-death moments, like all those fake outs? And I think you're using the word fake out, and that means for you, it went too far. But the point of them is suspense and drama, right? Someone's almost dying and we save them. But I guess if it goes too far, you might feel like it was a fake out, like you were essentially lied to. The example I gave in the video is a character shoots, you think someone is killed, but the camera pans over, actually they missed. So it feels like the movie lied to you, because in the story, nobody was shot. But because the camera was pointed the wrong way, it seemed like maybe they were. So that's some of the subjectivity, is how much for you is too much. Where do you feel like it kind of breaks your immersion of the movie?
Yeah, and they didn't go too far for me because I still felt the stakes the whole time. When Star-Lord is drifting between the two ships, I actually thought there was a chance he was going to die.
Especially the way he's getting all puffed up and everything.
And then when Groot extends his branches, I'm like, oh, thank God, like Groot's going to save him. And then his branches start freezing up in the cold of space. Like I thought he wasn't going to make it. And so it worked for me. Now, maybe some other people didn't buy that.
Right. Alun's been, he's not on with us today, but he's been, I don't know why I pointed over there. He's not over there.
He's over there.
Oh. He's been kind of dropping little complaints to me the last few days since we saw it. Like, and another thing. And he was kind of annoyed in that scene that the person who saved Peter was Adam Warlock.
Oh, I liked that a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, because I think that's thematically, again, it fits really well, which is the whole point of the Guardians of the Galaxy is it's these misfits who find family in each other. And Adam Warlock is like an artificially created person.
He's a man baby.
Yeah. Again, he really has no home, right? He doesn't really, even his like mother, right, uses him to complete missions for this psychopath creator of theirs, the High Evolutionary. And he goes through this, I thought, a great redemption arc where, yeah, like he redeems himself by saving Star-Lord, and then he gets to join the Guardians. I thought that's an awesome arc. Wow. How can Alun complain about this? What the hell?
It's not fair because he can't defend himself. I'll get quotes from him, and I'll bring them back next time to give his rebuttal.
But I was just going to say, it's a classic Guardians of the Galaxy type arc. I think it's great.
So I think the movie is sort of a celebration of family, friends, and the way that we support each other. So you create this character who's an empty shell. Adam Warlock doesn't know anything. And you sort of present these two alternate paths where they try to drill into him, like, you work for us, you do these evil missions, but he can't deny the positivity that comes from family. And ultimately, he ends up choosing that path. And I think that's a great way to sort of celebrate it, because you say, even if you try to hammer the bad stuff into somebody, ultimately, they're going to choose the good stuff because it's better. Yeah. Can't we all just get along? We don't have to fight. Just use a computer simulation. See who's going to win. Oh, I shouldn't make references to things we talked about too early, because then in the clip, it won't work.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
We can like splice
this is over.
We can splice in like a do-do-do-do-do, a flashback.
Do a flashback. That was another complaint I heard from Alun, which is that he didn't like constantly flashing back to the Rocket story. He was like, it would have been better if we just saw the whole thing at the beginning.
I completely disagree. I really liked it being spliced in with the flashbacks. I guess the one thing I wonder, like structurally, is did the flashbacks follow the arc of the overall story? And I kind of think they did. Like both stories sort of reached a climax around the same time, right?
Yeah, that's one thing I have to wonder. I mean, they definitely I think they reached a climax around the same time. So at least logistically, in terms of the things that are happening, like when you reach the important part of the story, it happens in both. But it's a good question of thematically or logistically, does it make sense where we're flashing back? Meaning, does it make sense that in that moment a character would be thinking about what happened, so we flash back to it? Or thematically, are they giving us relevant information, as it's relevant while the story is proceeding? I don't really remember. I definitely didn't feel distracted by jumping back, but I'll pay more attention to that on my rewatch tomorrow. I remember the one thing I didn't like about the flashbacks is that when we cut back to the present, it would do this effect where it would flash white for a second and be like, shoo, which just, I don't know why, it felt very TV to me. Like, I remember Angel used to do that a lot, that TV show. It would be like, before it cuts to another scene. And it reminded me of that, and that distracted me a little.
Yeah.
Apolock asks, Does James Gunn have too much cultural influence nowadays? Or has he tapped into what the masses will pay to watch? I don't get the feel that he has too much cultural influence. I'll say if he takes over the DC universe and it ends up turning into garbage, then I'll say he had too much cultural influence. But I see people making a comparison between him and Zack Snyder because Zack Snyder did end up sort of growing a cult of personality around him, released a Snyder cut. Some people, I'm not saying this, I might be saying it, but some people have said that at least a portion of that fandom got a little toxic and were a problem. So could the same thing happen with James Gunn? I think it's too early to say. I say he's gaining a following, he's gaining influence, but I think he's also earning it. So we'll see if it goes awry.
Yeah, I would also say I think he's, at least for me, I think he tapped into a really good theme where I think there's a lot of directors could have tapped into more superficial themes of just like it's good to have like literally in Guardians they said like at one point it's good to have friends.
Yeah.
Right? Now you could go for like a really cliche, just like it's good to have friends. But I actually thought this movie did a good job of having a slightly more complex, deeper theme, which is like what makes these people friends with each other is the fact that they're good people. Like they want good things for each other and for the world. And I think that's great, right? Whereas like the High Evolutionary hates Rocket because of how smart he is, right? And it's a good foil to no, like him and his friends like each other because they like the good things about each other. And so I thought, I don't know, I think that's a really good, deep, heartfelt theme that I think is missing in a lot of movies.
There's a lot of cynicism, I would definitely say, in our culture and definitely in the MCU nowadays. I also think, so he's presenting themes that we like in that I don't get sick of seeing. I talked about this in my Creed 3 video, but the underdog story never gets old. And it's a positive message to hear. You can achieve something if you try hard, don't give up, etc. That's a message that's worth giving a fresh coat of paint every once in a while and sort of representing. That's not necessarily the message that James Gunn is using, but that's just an example of it's good to hear positive things over and over. It's sort of the good side of brainwashing us. I think he also has tapped into a unique tone. Like he does the blending of comedy, action, and drama in a unique way that not everybody else does. And especially in the MCU, it's hard to have a unique voice. I feel like people complain that every movie is the same. Obviously, that's not true. They're not all the same, but tonally, they're all very similar. And if you watch Multiverse of Madness, there are a few scenes that stand out as like, those are the Sam Raimi scenes. But the rest of them feel like, okay, now we're in generic Marvel mode. You know what I mean? So it's hard to kind of pierce through that and stand out as unique. And I think James Gunn does that, which is part of why he's earned the cultural influence that he has. I had a question for you about Guardian. Oh yeah, what did you think about the moment where Rocket goes to heaven for a second?
I was literally just thinking about that scene. Okay, I think so. He goes to heaven, right, and he sees his old friends, right. In particular, he talks to the otter, Lila, yeah. And it felt the one part of that scene that annoyed me and was a little silly was when she tells him, what was it that she tells him?
It was your story all along.
Yeah, that it just felt jarring. Like just to say that, where I was like, are we breaking the fourth wall or something? Like what's going on? I think it was more like you are a main character in your story. You matter, right? Like emotionally, that's what I felt like that's supposed to mean. But the phrasing was just so odd.
It was too, unfortunately, it aligned perfectly with what was happening on the meta level of this movie, which is that Rocket has suddenly become the main character. So to then have a character say, Rocket, it's your story. It has been the whole time. It feels like breaking the fourth wall, even if it isn't literally. But even to say thematically it makes sense and it fits, you're sort of trying to piece it together. It doesn't feel obvious that it does.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I'll pay attention to in my rewatch tomorrow.
But one thing I did like about that scene, and now I can't remember if I'm making this up or not, I don't think I am, is, well, I think Rocket clearly, he carries a lot of guilt with him. Like a lot of survivor's guilt, right? Mm-hmm. Which is the fact that he survived and they didn't, right? In his escape, his 3 friends get killed. And I think when he sees her in heaven, like he says to her something like, I failed you, right? And then she tells him like, no, you didn't.
Possibly, I don't remember.
Am I making this up?
I remember him saying he wants to stay and she's like, not yet.
I really feel like he shows. I think he. Oh, I'll have to rewatch it. Maybe I made this up. If they didn't do this in the movie,
This
they
week's
should
edition
have.
of Daniel can't remember the thing he's trying to remember.
They should have done this in the movie if they didn't, where he basically tells them like, "Look, I failed. Like, I wish I could have saved you." Right, and she tells him like, "It's okay. Like, you did the best you could." I felt like that was powerful if that actually happened.
First off, you're a scab because you're suggesting rewrites, which would be totally inappropriate right now. What did you understand this, by the way? I'm going to blow your mind right now. When Groot at the end of the movie says, "I love you guys."
Yeah, he didn't actually say that. We're just hearing him.
Yeah,
because
as
we've
we
been with
saw,
him.
Gamora learned to understand Groot shockingly fast. Can I say that? It was pretty fast that she picked up on it. And now at the end of the movie, we have also learned to understand Groot. So he said, "I am Groot," but we heard, "I love you guys."
So that brings up a question I had, which is Gamora goes through somewhat of a transformation in this movie, right? Now she doesn't go back to her old self. She still stays with the Ravagers instead of with Peter Quill. But does she, like at one point she goes to save them, right? Like, and she didn't need to do that, right? She comes with the ship, I think, to save the rest of the heroes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So
Yeah, there's definitely a transformation where she's pretty cold toward them. And then, yes, later on in the movie, she goes out of her way to help them, for sure.
do you buy that?
Yeah, I bought that. I mean, we already know that she has it inside her to be good because we saw it from her alternate timeline. And yeah, I think she was moved by the way that they were going out on a limb for each other. I don't know. I remember in the moment I bought it.
Yeah, I think so. I guess for me, she started out so cold and mean. It was just like a little far.
Yeah,
Like she was very mean at the beginning.
that's true. Though who wouldn't be? I mean, it's kind of creepy that it's to meet your boyfriend from another timeline. And you just have, which I found kind of weird that everyone kept asking her, like, "You really don't remember a thing." How could she remember anything? It didn't happen in her reality. Maybe it's just sort of an emotional thing. Like, you look exactly like her. Maybe there's one of those, I've seen movies where the timelines will kind of cross and you might remember something from another timeline. Like, is that happening to you, Gamora?
Yeah, that's the subtext when they ask. You really
Yeah.
don't remember?
That would be like, "I am Groot." And he's saying everything I just said.
Yeah.
Anything else, Daniel, on Guardians 3?
Wait, I jotted down a couple notes. Let me see if I had anything else.
You wrote some note. Okay, I'll stop.
I jotted them down.
stop calling you a
That's
scab.
not writing. Okay, yeah, the only other thing I was wondering about is people say that like the heist scene, right, where they go to that like organic space station was filler. And I was debating, what does it even mean for something to be filler, right? I guess it's filler if it doesn't progress the plot in a meaningful way or progress like the theme or the characters.
Right.
Did it fail to do any of those things?
Yeah, I feel like I have to rewatch it because I don't remember all the beats of that scene. Like, I remember Peter and Gamora talking and it gets cut off by, "It's an open line." I remember Nathan Fillion. I remember the Drax almost dying scene. I mean, at minimum, it was one more chance for Gamora to see, look how much everyone here works together.
Yeah, also she gets to be impressed by Peter Quill because he makes
true.
it. He claims he could figure things out with his charm, right? By charming that one woman there.
Yeah.
And he does, right? And I think that impresses Gamora, and I think that's important to their relationship.
And he kind of shows that he's not as dumb as he looks.
Yeah.
He's like, "If I could just get them a message." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm not that stupid. I just needed to override the security protocols." And yeah, how does he know how to do that? Like, it's an alien computer you've never seen before. But anyway.
So I don't really think it's filler. I think it made sense in the plot. It was generally an entertaining scene. I would say what felt to me more like filler was just like a lot of the action in the last like 30 minutes of the movie. I think the movie should have just been like 30 minutes shorter. It just started to drag a little bit. Although at least some of the action scenes were more interesting and engaging than the MCU usually is.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, especially when we were doing some of the cool, almost first-person perspective as they were, Groot's arms shooting out, and a lot of these things where they presented it as though it was one fluid take, sort of.
One thought as I was watching that, I was like, wait, some of this action is like very gruesome. Like they're like shoving, like swords or like projectiles through like multiple aliens at once and gutting them and all this
There
stuff.
was the moment when they were bringing all the animals onto the ship. A monkey jumps onto this woman and just starts scratching at her face like crazy.
That was really messed up.
She's dead. That's the new high evolutionary you just created. At best, you just made a new high evolutionary. At worst, she's dead.
No. But they got those Zap Pack things they could put over her face now. It'll heal her.
I love that. They introduced that. They need to use it for Rocket, and then suddenly you see them everywhere. This technology has been around, but we just never saw it until now. I thought that was pretty funny.
But just the point about the gruesomeness, though, is... yeah, just make all the bad guys aliens so that you can do these really gruesome, disgusting things. Because if they look like humans,
I think
you
that's
can't do
what
that.
Ninja Turtles did for the video game. It's like, you're not killing people, you're killing robots that look like people. It's okay. The movie got pretty gruesome, though. Like, you actually saw the high evolutionary without his face on. I was surprised they actually showed that to us. You had your first F-bomb in MCU history. And I thought it was pretty funny. It landed.
What was it again?
So that's where Nebula and Peter get in the car, and Nebula can't figure out how to open the door. And she's like, okay, I'm pushing the button. Now what do I do? And he's like, now open the fucking door.
That's funny. Yeah, that was good.
I think that was an improvised line. They were just sort of messing around, and they were like, let's keep it in. Screw it. James Gunn doesn't care anymore. It's his last movie. Senioritis. His last movie anyway. Okay, I do have one complaint. See, it's funny because we went into this review with the mode of like, we're defending this movie. Not against haters, against people who were like, I liked it, but I had a few problems with it.
Yeah, I really feel like I'm defending it against lukewarm reviews.
Right. But one thing I can't stand in Star Wars movies or other sci-fi movies, when you blow up a planet, it's really hard to comprehend the scale of what you've just done. Like every atrocity that's ever been committed in the history of our history, it's worse than that because you have killed not one group of people, not several. You have killed everyone.
All right,
children.
Let me fix this for you. He created...
They weren't people, they were animals.
Whoa. Gil, how could you say such a thing? No, let me defend it because, first of all, the timeline doesn't make any sense, right?
I know.
How old is Rocket?
Yeah, how long do raccoons live? I don't know.
So anyway, like... I don't know, max, maybe it's been a few decades or something. And somehow he's created these the high evolutionaries created these like complex societies on this counter Earth planet. Like it just doesn't make any sense. So the way I'll defend it is he actually didn't build out a whole planet of people. It was just like that one town.
Okay. It was just one town and the rest of Contra Earth was empty. Okay.
And it was like 40 people and it's tragic, but it was like 40 people.
There was a...
Or to quote Stalin,
okay,
one death is a tragedy. 1,000,000 deaths is a statistic. That might not have been like perfectly verbatim, but there you go. That's the other way to defend
it. And that
it.
was your Daniel's Bits history corner for the week.
Yeah, we forgot to cue the music.
Yeah, I remember thinking, why didn't you just make one of these animal hybrid things? See if they're to your liking. And then if not, you can kill the one. But instead, he's like, let's fill a whole planet. Wait a minute, they suck. All right, destroy it. Let's start over.
Well, to be fair, the how much they suck could be an emergent property of them having a complex society, right? You might not know.
That's true, yeah.
I like also the sign that it sucks is the fact that there's like drug dealing going on.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, like there's also like, people getting beaten and robbed. And so it's all the things we would think of as like being wrong with society. So that's fair. But it was just funny seeing these like anthropomorphized creatures like dealing drugs.
MJ, by the way, says, makes sense. The one-town theory. The one-town theory brought to you by One Take has been endorsed by MJ.
And if anybody else on YouTube talks about the one-town theory without giving proper credits to One Take, we'll see you in court.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? Do you want me to stop asking you that? I always get to the end of a topic and I'm like, any other thoughts?
No, I like when you ask me.
You do?
That,
okay, I
have more thoughts.
All right, cool. So, more thoughts?
No, I think we've covered it. I think it was a great movie. Yeah, it was awesome.
So the one thing in terms of the future now, so I am curious to see what happens with these characters. So my impression is this is the last time we will see that team of Guardians. It's possible there'll be another Guardians movie with the newly formed team, and they end by saying the legendary Star-Lord will return. So of course we'll see Peter Quill again. I'm curious what that's going to look like without James Gunn's involvement. Will they turn Quill into a blithering idiot who punches a mad titan, thereby threatening the entire multiverse? Though counter-argument to that, Doctor Strange said there's only one possible timeline where we win, and that has to be the one where Peter punches Thanos. But maybe if he didn't punch Thanos, there could have been, I mean, what is it, determinism? Get out of here.
I guess it is sort of determinism. Well, no, because there's all these different timelines you could end up in. They just happen to be in this one timeline.
Right. The future. So we talked about the future of the Guardians in the MCU. I'm always more excited by the filmmakers behind the stuff, because they are the ones who will assure you there's going to be quality. Like if you liked Guardians 3, you might be, oh, I'm excited to see more Guardians. Or if you're like me, I'm excited to follow James Gunn to see what he does next. And the one question I have is, he has created this sort of unique tone, but I feel like that's all I've seen him do. Can he get outside of that? I believe his next movie is going to, or definitely the first movie coming in the new DCU, and it's going to be written and directed by James Gunn. It's going to be Superman Legacy. To me, that movie should not, or at least I would prefer it not have the same tone as Suicide Squad or Guardians of the Galaxy. So can he give us a different tone? Have humor in it, for sure, but don't make it a comedy. Because I would say Guardians, Suicide Squad, they often function by the rules of a comedy, where you don't quite feel like you're watching a version of the real world. You're watching something that takes place in like a Will Ferrell or Adam Sandler movie, almost. So can he stray from that tone? That's my question, and we'll find out in a few years.